Oh, share my screen, not that one. I am now going to have that song stuck in my head all day.
And you deserve it.
Yeah, it's all my fault, right?
Yeah,
All
all your
right.
fault.
Make sure I'm all ready to go. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you back to Virtual Design School. We are on week
Yeah.
number 2. We're going to be talking all about empathy. I know last week there's a couple people we were getting on Twitter. I want to see more people. So jump online. Start live tweeting during this. If you've got questions for Paolo or maybe us, you can throw them up on Twitter or into the chat box as well. Ali is going to be watching that chat box again today. And then if you do have any technical issues, please message the Design Lab, the host, or our fantastic technical assistant, Shay Lynn. So I want you guys in the chat box to talk about what challenge did you face while you're doing your problem framing. So this morning I came on in nice and early and it was like a flood of people's pictures of the
Mm,
problem framing worksheets that they were doing, and some people had a lot of fun with it. We had some pretty fantastic drawings
we
actually,
did, yeah, yeah.
which I was really pumped about. I love that. Too many problems to choose from Rhonda.
Oh, yeah, and Geraldine says that it was difficult narrowing down what she wanted to work on. And Deborah says even what a problem was.
Oh, Matthew got stuck on the 3 ways to ensure failure.
All right. Yeah, ensuring failure and then reframing them into goals of success. Well, don't worry, we can definitely go through that. And we actually pulled from three ones that the problems that pulled us in. It really, this first one, first of all, we absolutely loved the extra effort that went into making this pretty. And I think what this person said is it doesn't have to be perfect, but it can be pretty. And so she made it that way. But what we really liked about that is if you look at the first, how might we, and where she started with, it's really kind of talking about how they can support agents to maintain high levels of empathy. And then by the time she got to the end of the insight and the reframe, she's more talking about how to get agents to connect with their clients and their customers to create empathy. So it's a real nice shift. It brings a new lens, and she doesn't use all of the insights that she picks up through there. She does use her instinct to kind of focus on what she thinks the biggest insight might be and uses that for her reframe. On the second one we saw, first of all, I love this one because it starts with a very single problem statement. And that's kind of something that we saw a little bit as we were going through, is that people didn't start with a statement, they started with a question. And so it's really important to really identify what the problem is before you frame it into a how might we, because it can kind of send you off on the wrong track if you don't. So this example doesn't try to list all the successes, goals of success in the final reframe either. It kind of centers on the how might we moved from increasing adoption to creating a culture. So again, using that instinct to figure out which insight and what kinds of insights help the reframe. And then the last one that I want to talk about is Josh and I loved this one. They started off really well, generated more than a few good insights, and then kind of seemed to lose the plot for the final reframe. And as you can see, the first How Might We is focused on making reporting easy, but then the final reframe kind of changes, and we had high hopes for this one. The insights are in fact like fantastic, but the last reframe just kind of misses the mark. It's like they almost just kind of gave up on all the stuff that they kind of generated during this exercise.
And really everything that needs to be in that final problem statement, it's all there.
It's all there. Yeah.
And it's really good. I was reading it, I'm like, yes, yes. And then I got to the end, I'm like, oh, it's so close,
Oh,
so
yeah,
close.
exactly.
But it's a really fantastic start. This is something that does take some practice, but is really valuable for your work when you get started.
Yeah, and if you are having some questions about, how to do a specific part of the exercise, remember that you can text us, email us ahead of time, tweet us ahead of time, and ask for help, and we're happy to provide it.
Yeah, even if you want like a quick 5-minute phone call with us to go through it, yeah, I'm more than willing to do it. I like my coffees double. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. In case you're in Red Deer. Um, So we're going to get started on empathy today. And that is that first stage within that design thinking process. And we have Paolo here joining us. He's a master of empathy, even better now. He's got a young one at home. If you were here earlier, we were talking about it. He is the Director of Services Design for St. Elizabeth Futures team. So he does work with Zaina from, if you guys remember, from week 1. So Paolo, I'm going to stop sharing and hand the reins over to you.
Okay, let me see. So how do I okay, share. Okay, let me know. Can you see the screen?
It's working.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks for the intro. Let's see, can I click through? There we go. So Zaina last week kicked off our presentation, and so she gave a little bit of a view of who we are. I work for a social enterprise called SE Health, not formerly St. Elizabeth. And our goal is to explore new frontiers of innovation. And funny, the ones that we see identify as the newest are very much the oldest, which is care for people in their own home, where they want to be. So there's a slogan on the screen here, and I heard our CEO say that the other day. And it was, someone said that was our old company slogan, and I don't know if that actually was, but I thought, wow, it really should be. And because, you know, I thought it appropriate given that we were going to be talking about design. So we see the future of healthcare, and it has throw pillows. I'm Paolo, as Josh introduced. I'm the Director of Service Design, but I use that term service design interchangeable with design thinking, human-centered design, experience-based design, design strategy. Some people call it, there's any number of different terms, and they all kind of circle around a similar concept. However, the term design is really a loaded one. And so if you ever try to explain to someone, if you as a practicing designer, you ever try to explain to someone what you do, and you say the words design, certain things come to their mind, I'm sure. The first is that of creating well-appointed interiors, fussing and getting into the details of throw pillows, and making sure that that precise pop of color makes your environment sing. Or being really obsessed with the beauty of graphics and making visuals really, really compelling. Another common one is elegantly designing objects that make your space look great, that are a joy to handle and use. It's funny, this is Leslie. I'm wearing a Leslie watch right now. This is the company on the screen right here. And sometimes it makes you think of people, icons, personas of design. So this is Kareem Rashid, and he's a very famous award-winning Canadian industrial designer, and some of his products are on the left. And the thing that I think unites all of these is this idea of the inspired individual who is exercising their creativity to bring something into the world, to add something new, so add some sort of value, but through their own efforts, will, vision. The challenge with that is, in healthcare, we're asked to tackle things that are a little different. For example, obesity. And that might require something a little different. There was actually a term for these challenges, and Zaina used this actual diagram last week too, because this is the one that maps out obesity. And they're known as wicked problems. And the nature of wicked problems is that you don't know where the starting point is. There is no endpoint. And you can't act on one part of the system without impacting the rest. It's not complicated, it's complex, because you can't see all of it. It's just too difficult. So when I was at grad school a few years ago studying design, I had a professor by the name of Larry Keeley, and he's the head of Dublin, part of Deloitte, and he had this great saying: in the face of complex problems, when you feel the urge to be creative, lie down until the feeling passes. And I know we have a session coming up. I believe we have a session on creativity coming up. So I don't mean to say that creativity isn't important, because after all, design is an act of creation. However, what I do think Larry was saying, what I mean to say here, is that the types of creativity attributed to design typically is insufficient for the complex problems and types of challenges we face in healthcare. So I'm going to move away from that idea of the inspired designer, that creative individual, to the idea of design, to Milton Glazer's definition. Design is the process of going from an existing condition to a preferred one. And that process is not just about, it includes creativity, but it also includes mindset, which I believe Marlise is going to talk about, and methodology, which we are all talking about. So now you're given a problem to solve, and many of you realize sometimes it's really specific, sometimes it's really vague, and you're thrown into the situation where, okay, where do I even start? As a creative individual, sometimes, you would have a whim, you would have a feeling about it, but the nature of these types of challenges, you feel like you're thrown into the fog and being asked to navigate in a specific direction. Take your ships and sail in a direction, but with these ambiguous, complex challenges, there is no clear or obvious starting place. So this is where the practice of design can be of real benefit to organizations that are dealing with this sort of complexity, because they have a very specific lens on this. And again, this is a diagram that Zaina shared last week, known as the balanced breakthrough model. And designers are, by virtue, integrating all of these factors: what is desirable for people, what is viable for business, and feasible for technology. But design is very clear that the starting place, the entry point to complex challenges, is looking at what is desirable for people. Or another way of saying that, what are people's experiences, or what is important to the lives and feelings of people. I have, as Josh said, I am a new father, so I've come to have an appreciation for design in a different way. I came across this slide and spoke to me because I think it talks, again, about the bridge between, or the difference between design as an act of simple individual creativity and that of methods-based one with the right mindsets. Because as an inspired individual, I can create what I believe to be the right solution, but without the right perspective, well, you can see from this illustration. And this is all fun and games and hilarious and all when the consequences are a poorly designed product, like a mobile here. But in our case, I'll throw this up here. This is the slide I had from, this is my intro photo, I think. So you'll notice from my picture here, I'm a white dude, middle-aged. You might be able to guess from my clothes. I'm, middle class. Can't tell from the photo, but I'm in relatively good health. So if my risk of missing my perspective leads me to design a poorly designed mobile, well, what is the risk of me doing harm or doing poor design for problems of aging, First Nations, chronic disease, addictions, mental health, poverty, and homelessness, where my perspective is not the one, I'm not the perspective of the person under that mobile. The risk here is far greater than having a bunch of plush stuffed animals with their butts in your face. So often I'm asked to start addressing these sort of topics. And now there's a political answer here, is that, I really shouldn't. I don't have you as, I might not have the right to start tackling some of these. That's a discussion we can take offline, and happy to engage in that in a more theoretical construct. However, a practical answer is really to start with empathy. Now, empathy, as we define, is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. But when I talk about empathy, it's not a kind of a standalone thing. It's not just the act of feeling another person, because there's enabling qualities to it. You can't just be empathetic. There's actually some precursors to that. That is first that of humility. In order to enter into an empathetic state, you first have to be humble and recognize that your own view, your own abilities, your own knowledge is insufficient, is not necessarily right, or is misplaced. So you have to be able to first lower yourself and say, you know what, the information doesn't lie with me. The second part of it is the curiosity to say, okay, if it doesn't lie with me, where is the answer? Who knows better than me? And have the desire to learn. And this modality of humility, of listening and recognizing, and the curiosity to learn and listen is throughout all of the design processes. And this is what enables an empathetic point of view. I'm going to break from theory for a few seconds to give you an example of what this actually looks like in practice. So one of the challenges a wickedly complex challenge is homelessness. And in one case study I heard recently, they were talking about the challenges of offering clinical services to the homeless, getting them in for visits and check-ins. And there was a segment of the population that just wasn't going in. And the rational approach wasn't working because, that applies to people who might have a regular job, who are living in middle income, who have stable mental health, who have other factors that don't relate to the people who are living on the streets. So a rational approach, one of common sense, didn't necessarily the ones that appealed to the clinicians didn't work. And so they weren't getting the homeless to come to these clinic visits. So one group took a different tact, and they thought to elevate the perspective and the values and what's important to the homeless and look at and develop an empathetic point of view. And they developed this mandate. Our mandate is to improve the health and welfare of the client by providing health services and community connections that matter to them. That's the key part. Not the stuff before, but that matter to them. And so when they went to understand what is it that mattered to them, they discover pretty quickly it's their pets. There is a lot of research and there is a lot to be said here about about how homeless view themselves and some of the challenges associated with it. But and I won't get into that, but one of the things that came out of this was that the homeless actually care oftentimes more for the well-being of their pets. And that insight allowed this one particular clinic to develop an offering where they would host both a clinic for them and veterinary appointments for their pets to incent the homeless to come in. And this had tremendous success in reaching that population who, were not getting into the clinics and who had pets. So clearly I'm making a value statement about our starting point. And that is about understanding people and understanding their experiences. The question is, where do these magical insights come from that we can use as starting off places or to inform our projects? In the vein of traditional healthcare research that we know about, I mean, there is a lot of scholarly articles that are posted on there. People have done great work in research out there and on various topics, be it homeless, obesity, patient experience in waiting rooms, etc. That research is out there. And it would be a shame for us to dismiss this and say, no, go out and do these other kinds of research I'll talk about. But really, it's a good place to start. And especially at the beginning of projects, when you're focused on framing, this is a really accessible form of data. It's not going to necessarily get you to all the insights that you want, but it's a starting place. In a similar vein, we could say popular media. This gets written about in many of our main publications. And they do a good job sometimes capturing stories that you may not hear in more rigorous journals. The ones I would like you to pay a little more attention to are these latter three methods of gaining insight into human experience and developing empathy. The first is what is called semi-structured interviewing. And it's really about talking to people, talking to them about their experience, gathering stories. And the reason it's called semi-structured interviewing is you go into these interviews with a sense of what questions you want to ask, general sense of information you were looking to get, and prompts that you think would engender or some sort of response. But you're not sticking to an agenda. You're not sticking to a protocol. If someone takes you down a story that you ask more about that story, you approach with curiosity. You say, tell me more about that. Ask more detail about what they were talking about. And you may get off topic and that you originally expected to. And because the purpose of semi-structured interviews is not to validate as much as it is to discover. And by just talking to someone about their stories and experiences, it opens up the opportunity for discovery. Another very common design method of research is known as ethnography or observational research, which is a quality of simply going out and watching, observing what happens. People are often not aware of how they act or what they are doing. A lot of this falls to the subconscious. They don't, on autopilot, they're going through the day. So they don't necessarily have the wherewithal to step back and make comments about their behaviors. They're just not aware of it. They may not be aware of the eccentricities and quirks that they present. So to ask them a question about it sometimes is just not going to yield the right results. So one of the ways to deal with this is to go and observe, see what people do. So I'll often tell people to go, who are learning about design, go to sit in a Starbucks and just watch people as they go try to engage in coffee. What do you see? And when you're looking for it, all of a sudden these funny human quirks, these interesting things happen, and that you don't expect. And that's part of it. Again, the intent of this type of research is discovery, not necessarily validation. I did this exercise with a group out of a hospital I used to work with, and this group was called the Hospital Navigators, and they help patients get around. And the idea, I was trying to teach them to simply to build empathy and to understand about patient experience. And I had them sit in with a patient in their room and sit quietly, just watch what happened. And one observed this patient who was just in such discomfort sitting in their bed and would wriggle and writhe and just couldn't get comfortable. And this navigator could see on the person's face, they were unsettled. So finally he spoke up. He said, okay, what's going on? Can you tell me what you're feeling right now? And he was saying he was so uncomfortable with the bed being the way it was. And so he asked, why don't you just adjust it? And he had no idea, this patient had no idea that he was allowed to adjust the bed just because it's hospital equipment. I'm not allowed to touch it. So again, some things that we as observers would take for granted, he discovered that this is something that other people hold and some part of their experience. And had we gone looking for that, we never would have found that. If this kind of research sounds familiar, it's because it was blatantly ripped off from social sciences research. Again, there's a political discussion to be had here about whether this, colonialism and this type of research. But again, putting that aside, on its best, this sort of research allows you to approach a subject with naivety, humility, and impartial curiosity and say, what is happening here? And actually ask those questions that about people's experience and what they're feeling that they may not be able to identify themselves. So another way of conducting this kind of research is trying stuff for yourself, getting into the field and trying to simulate what that experience might be. Thanks to my friend Bonnie for reminding me of some of these methods. If you're on the call, Bonnie, shout out to you, thank you. A number of different groups have developed aging suits to simulate what it would be like to lose sensory capabilities and then try to navigate their world as a senior might. Or a number of pharmacies have been working with these reduced visibility glasses to see what it's like to open a pill pack when you can't see. Another more common one that you see in, very often with consumers is try to buy the service yourself. If something you're trying to sell, try to do it yourself or bring your mother through the experience and see how that experience goes. We try to offer resources in navigation for our healthcare system, and then we try to navigate it ourselves, and it is damn hard. So in trying it ourselves, we build a sense of really what it is like and what other people might go through. Inevitably, we get the question about the validity of this type of research and this sort of data, especially when in healthcare, we prize large quantitative studies where we have study groups in the thousands. And again, the difference, the thing is about those is you can get validation and evidence to prove a direction. So how does this stand up then? How does this other kind of research stand up when you have N's of 10, 5, or even 1? When you have a story from one person, how does that hold a candle to these studies of 10,000? Well, the key to that is that it's doing different things. On one hand, we might talk about homeless in a quantitative studies, and you'll find really important metrics that give you a sense of the nature of the challenge: the suicide rate, homeless, the percentage of homeless that use emergency department, and this is really important information. But then there's the other side of the story, which is the other side of this data, which is individual stories. I could tell you about the multiple times I threw myself at the mercy of emergency rooms, too busy and too involved to be bothered with my unglamorous suicide cries, sending me right back out the automated doors with a bill to be paid, then driving around the next couple hours trying to resist the pull of that handy, quick to turn into oncoming speeding traffic. So you might get, just by reading a story, you might get a sense of the real value there, which is that sort of data does different things. It's emotive. It impacts you. As researchers, designers, planners, we're humans, and the motivation to actually act on these problems and to feel it is really important, because it's not enough to just have an intellectual grasp of the problem. When you read about challenges, you may get a sense of some of the challenges, but it's also important to really feel it, because that's going to motivate you to act. It's going to motivate senior leaders to make decisions about this. It's not just cold data. The other part here, as I said, it's about discovery. When you talk to people or you observe people, you can get stories which will give you important details that might be lost in large studies. There is also amount of, as I said, the unspoken, things that people don't know to say. People don't, if the right question isn't presented, or they don't know how to articulate what they're thinking, that can also get lost. And then under all of this, there is also room for validation of this. Say you have a really powerful story, but it is only one person. We're in no way suggesting that that should be the basis for all your design and all your decision making. Rather, throughout the rest of the design process, you have an opportunity to then test is this story, is this perspective, is this person's experience true? When I design and include this, I want to go out and test, does this also hold true for other people? So it's not as risky as people might think at first blush. So, as I said, I've been trying to hammer home, you're not the lone designer, you're not the lone creative genius. In design requires then collaboration. So these insights can't just sit with you alone, or even just your small crack team of brilliant designers. This needs to be shared because it needs to it needs to reach the other people who are making those decisions. And so a couple tools that are very commonly used that are very handy, I'm going to share with you. First, and probably best known design tool out there is that of the persona. And the persona is a mini biography of a person, ideally representing a real person out there. For privacy's sake, you often blur some of the details, change the names, change location, but you keep the essence of their story there. And that's the important part, is the story of who this person is. What's valuable to them? What is their life experiences? What are the challenges they face? Who are they? What's a priority? And two of the elements, I've seen personas done in other fields. And the two characteristics I see often in design personas that are left out in other fields that I think are super important are a quote and a photo. And the reason they are super important is not necessarily because they are going to give you super important data, but they remind you again, this is a person, this is a real person. And when you bring this persona into your room as you are making decisions, you're reminded this is a person who feels this every day. So it's easier to make decisions knowing that, hey, this has to impact and in our case, Mr. Carmelo here. Our decisions here should be okay with him. Our designs should be acceptable to him. Will this fit into his life? Another tool that's often used is what's known as the empathy map. It's a breakdown of the various aspects of someone's experience. It addresses what people think and feel, what they hear, what they see, what they say and do in an experience, and then what pains do they derive from that experience, as well as what other gains or joys or benefits might they derive. And breaking it down, you start to see there's any given experience, there's a lot more than what superficially we may assume. So this is an example of a person who is trying to book an appointment with their primary care doctor and struggling to do so. And so it breaks down everything, the various aspects of it. And I'll call it a couple ones. They're hearing that there's work and family demands. So it's making it very, very difficult for them to find time to actually book this appointment. They're saying and doing that it's representing that he has this fear of leaving work because it's going to compromise his ability to get a promotion. So his pains are obviously then in finding availability balanced against the struggles of his life. This isn't something that would necessarily, you would assume or would jump out if you were to look at the superficial level of what someone's experience might be in an online service to booking an appointment, or the phone-in process, or any typical process improvement to get someone to connect with their primary care doc.
Paolo?
Yep.
2-minute warning. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll blast through the last few here. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind here is that we talk about this in a user-centered perspective. This is user-centered design. And one thing seasoned designers will tell you is that it's never just the patient. When you're designing systems that have to be impacted, the user is far more than just that one person at the center we typically think of as the end user. We were designing a surgical care pathway And again, the focus was on the patient's experience, but we could have very easily neglected the opinion of the surgeon, who for very good reasons was resisting earlier discharges of that patient because they were concerned that when they discharged a patient, they weren't going to rehab. And if we didn't take their challenges into keep that in mind, we wouldn't have been able to actually deliver because the surgeon's perspective wouldn't have been considered, nor the nurses, nor the coordinators. And all of these users have to be considered. One way to do that, to help you with that, is to use a tool called a stakeholder map or an influence map that captures and reflects who are the other stakeholders in the group. I'm going to try to fly through here. By this kind of same logic, you start to see then that being empathetic towards various users, you can start being empathetic also to the people you work with. And not just the design team, but decision makers in your company, you people who you are partnering with and other organizations, and you start to have decisions in a very different way. You also start to see that you have to address that you're working with humans and understand the foibles and eccentricities of humans. For example, our tendency to miscommunicate about ideas in our head. When we realize that we have to relate and understand other people and how they think too, we start to design the process a little differently. And for this very reason, design is all about working visually so that you can start relating to other people and they can start relating to you, not simply keeping ideas in your own head. So to quickly just summarize what I've been saying here is, I'm pushing this idea here of empathy, and that it's really a culmination of curiosity and humility. It requires us to collect stories and understand stories and the lived experience of people, and then keep that at top of mind. This is not just for end users, but all users, as well as the people you work with and the people you engage with in every day. And really, frankly, you should be empathetic towards all people. And if you start to do that, I will argue that you will have a fairly different take on creativity in your work. So thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. That was fantastic.
That was great.
So, Ali, I'm going to toss it over to you for a second.
Yeah.
How's the chat box look?
People have been having a lot of great conversations. I want to give people the opportunity to ask any questions to Paolo.
Are you going to filter them, Ali?
Yeah, nothing. I'll let you know, nothing has come up yet. One question I had, Paolo, to just get us started, is you talked about, there was a bit of a chatter on our chat box about people feel much more comfortable with talking to their staff and team, but not enough to users and open up to them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. It is super uncomfortable to start with. That is normal in every design profession. But there is a certain momentum that you can gain once you start to do it. It's no different than speaking in public. You get it under your belt and you start realizing you can do it. There's also the norms that you have to recognize, that it is normal to kind of keep our research in really comfortable bounds, but we really need to break those boundaries to get to people who are often misrepresented. One of the values of good design is to elevate the voice and put the decision-making, kind of represent and bring the voice of people who are misrepresented or underrepresented. And when we talk only to staff or people who are familiar, we lose the view of the people who are often the ones who need to be served.
Right.
This is especially true when you're working with complex or marginalized populations, or populations that are harder to reach.
All right, one last question, because we're just going to be tight on time. there's some Bonnie asked, there's a lot of emphasis on consent and ethical considerations. Does the same apply here? What do you do? How do how do you get around that?
You don't get around it. I think that, well, there's a few things. I think, you have to, there is a good reason why ethics boards exist. And so you don't try to work around it. However, more and more, we're finding that ethics boards are appreciating and working with researchers and designers to understand the iterative nature of research. We just did a study around self-screening for HPV with First Nations and recent immigrant population. And the challenge was we didn't know what we were solving until we got out there. And that's very unusual for a research board, a research ethics board, because you're given typically the research protocol up front. These are the questions we're going to answer. This is the methods. This is how we're going to do it. And here's the results we expect. However, in this case, we said, we're going to go talk to people we don't know. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? And we're like, well, we will find out once we do our first research and then our first round of focus groups and interviews and observation. And then we're going to come back and then we're going to figure out what the insights are. And then we're going to design an engagement session based on that. Right. And so they were this particular research ethics board was very accommodating and said, okay, well, let's build this ethics board approval over time in an iterative fashion. And we co-developed over time I wouldn't say co-developed. We developed and submitted in phases the ethics approval.
Thank you. That's actually a really good example, Paolo. There's a lot of questions coming up, but we're very short on time. Paolo, we have people, his Twitter hashtag and his information is going to be in our notes. So you can reach out to Paolo directly if you have more detailed questions about it. Paolo, I want to thank you for your time and for your great presentation. It was always to learn more about empathy. I could keep learning more about it. I want to jump into our next activity, which is our breakout session. As last time, the question we want everyone to think about is, what would prevent you from going out and talking to real users? What would prevent you from going out and talking to real users? And Shaylin, you're gonna get us into our breakout. We're gonna give you guys about 5 minutes to talk about this in your breakouts.
Okay, but did you go? That's probably why our next year was right. Yeah, but like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Hello, is anyone there?
Hi, Catherine. This is Shaylin. Can I help you out?
Oh, I mean, I can't hear anyone. I don't know if anyone's talking.
Okay. If you can hear me, most likely everyone else is maybe just on mute. Let me just see who's in the group here.
Yeah, I can hear you, so that's good. Matthew,
Okay.
Rhonda?
Matthew and Rhonda, are you guys able to unmute yourselves? Okay. Next to the microphone button at the bottom of your screen, Matthew, do you see an arrow that points up? You can generally select your audio through there.
Oh, hi, is this working?
There, we can hear you now.
I tried that a few times, and I don't know if it was an issue on my end with the hardware, but now it seems to be working. If you can hear me, that's great.
Yeah, perfect.
I did the same thing, Matthew. I was unmuting and muting, and then I had to go Control-Alt-A. In the end, there was a warning that said Control-Alt-A, and that's what finally did it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I don't know. Rhonda, are you there?
Rhonda, can you hear us? Hi, Geraldine, it's Shaylin. Can I help you out?
Hi, Shaylin. Yeah, we're still having problems in our breakout room here with respect to everybody being able to speak. I'm kind of the only one that seems to be able to speak, and so I just thought I'd bring it to your attention.
Okay, sure. If anyone else is having issues with audio, can you just message me in the chat box to let me know if you can hear anything and if it's just your microphone that's not working? Okay, let's see. Okay, so if you're having issues with your audio, there's a little arrow up next to the microphone in the bottom left side of your screen. And you can select your audio for hearing and also for talking in that drop box.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll work on that next time around,
Yeah,
perhaps.
time's up. So sorry. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Are we all piling back in? Aaron, you're here?
I am here.
Awesome.
All right. So what are some things that you heard in your breakout, Josh?
Oh man, we had a conversation around the control from operations. It's like this is kind of our work, and they're coming from more of a consultant space. So it was really, really interesting. How about you, Aaron?
Well, we were talking about the kind of the conflict between when you're, trying to do investigative research and you have ethics hoops to jump through and things like that. But then there's that really, design is fast and design thinking is fast. And so that conflict of trying to jump through the hoops and yet still get your work done in a timely fashion can be really difficult to navigate.
Yeah, it's not easy. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about, I'm going to share a story about an experience of a project that I worked on. Yeah, this is me and Aaron. I did a project on food services for Care West in Calgary. And they wanted to start to improve and change the way they did deliver food services. I think it was for 1,700 residents. And, they came to us like, we've been trying to work on this for 40 years and we don't know where to go and where should we even start? And so we said, okay, well, we want to just start by touring all of your sites. And we asked for structured tours from food service managers to kind of show us their space. Where do they work? And while we were doing that, we were doing unstructured, these semi-structured interviews as we were going along. And it didn't matter who they were. if you are someone who is from environmental services all the way up to a senior program officer, you were not free from the grasp of a question from Josh or Aaron.
Yeah,
And,
it's true.
and this was all about us just going in there with that humbleness and that curiosity, because let's face it, like, I like food. It's obvious. I really like food, but I have no idea what it takes to deliver food to 1,700 residents 3 times a day.
Mm.
And, you know, these questions and that curiosity we came with were really, really important as we were moving along in this project. And I'll be honest, I learned a lot. I still don't have enough knowledge to run a kitchen for a long-term care center.
What, you're not a chef now?
No, I'm not a chef now, as much as I tried. But we kind of gained a good understanding of what it was like to be a person, anyone along the line, whether you were a food service worker, whether you were a chef, whether you're a resident, whether or not you were a healthcare aide and you were feeding patients. We learned from everybody that was part of this big system and service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The next part was to get, sorry, Aaron.
Oh, I was just going to say that one of the conundrums was that everybody that we spoke to wanted to have pride, felt the need for the food to be good. They had all of the equipment to make it good, but it just wasn't good.
And
so
that came to the last kind of big thing that we did for empathy. And we thought, what a cool way to get everybody kind of on board and build up energy and get them to want to try something differently by feeding them the food.
yeah.
So we're like, hey, we're going to do a discovery day. We're going to pull 60 people together. But instead of starting at 8 in the morning, we're going to start at noon. And instead of starting with speeches and this is what we found and here is our data, we said, all right, welcome everybody. We're going to have lunch.
Let's eat. Yeah.
So we broke bread with 60 people, and they included, you know, those senior program officers we were talking about, executive directors, managers,
Mm-hmm.
residents, family members of those residents, and
Chefs, kitchen assistants, patient assistants, and patients.
And we all got to sit and enjoy the food. And it was the energy that occurred as soon as that lunch was done.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody all of a sudden was on board, and they were like, you know what, we need to do something. We need to try something better.
Yeah.
And we actually had one of the family members come up to us at the end and said, I was ready to come in here and just yell and be upset.
Yeah.
And he's like, but by the end of it, I seen that everybody's heart was in the right place and they really wanted to work on something new. And this
Mm-hmm.
set such a strong foundation for the work that we did later on with this group.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially for that patient group, they felt like they mattered because the food mattered to them and we were working on it. It was impactful.
So that leads us into this activity that you guys are going to do. I've seen a couple people in the chat box who are like, I'm excited about this week.
Yeah. So we would like you to create your own empathy map. So if you have a chance to talk to some real end users for your problem, or you actually should probably start about thinking, who is your end user? Now, whose behavior do you want to influence or change? Whose story do you need to understand in order to come up with some solutions for your problem? And not just who is your end user, but what are they trying to do? And that's how you start off with this activity. And then as you begin the kind of the circle around that person's face, start off with what they see. That's quite often the easiest thing to start with. And then work clockwise. So then to say and do what they hear, and then finally what they think and feel. And you need to take a look and organize your information on this so that you can pull those pains and gains out of the information. And again, I really want to encourage people to use their intuition here, but also make sure that you, if you get a chance, think about what would happen if you show that empathy map to somebody who was a real end user. Would it resonate with them? Could you talk to them and find out more information? Might they have a different perspective for you?
And we have a really awesome question from Catherine R. is the difficulty with the hear portion. I
Mm,
like to use quotations in this. What are things that the user may actually be hearing?
Yeah.
So maybe it's a nurse that's speaking to them. Maybe it's a unit clerk. Maybe it is a food service worker. We don't know, who they'd be interacting with, but I always say go directly with the quotation marks.
yeah. And Kay Cleary has a question. Are we still investigating with proceeding on our goal? And absolutely. So take a look at your reframed how might we question that you did through your exercise. And that is the how might we that you're starting your problem with. So that's the point you want to look at and figure out who your end user is and who the person at the center of this empathy map needs to be.
So, and like Aaron said, I was in a room and, we would say one of the rules that we have is call it the elephants in the room.
Mm.
And I was doing an empathy map with a bunch of managers and they were trying to empathize with their own staff without them being in the room. I was just teaching them how to do them. And I was looking at it, I was like, I don't think this is really would resonate with them. So I got to the end and I said, could you take this to your staff? And they would say, yes, love it.
Mm. So
And
Alice, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And funny enough, they all said no, and they kind of erased their map and start all over again. So it's a great way to do a temperature check if you're using this as a facilitation tool.
Allison asks if there can be more than one end user. And if you think back to Paolo's statement about really trying to humanize the user by using a persona, that can be really effective if you can imagine your persona is in the center of this empathy map. But sometimes you're working with groups of people. So you might be talking about, like we just did, this particular empathy map is on what people who are struggling with methamphetamine addiction experience when they present at the emergency department. So that's a demographic that we're looking into, but that is a singular experience as well.
So really for everybody, I'm just trying to wrap up now. And this is all about building a strong foundation. It's all about talking to the humans who are at the heart of the problem and what we're trying to work on. And there are many different ways to connect with them, but the take-home piece I really want for you guys is talk to humans, because they are at the center of everything that we do. And really, as you understand your users, your problem can kind of shift and change. So be ready to pivot. When you get into that first conversation, the problem can change a little bit, and just always keep that in mind.
That's right. So next week, we are going to talk to Andrew Sue, and we're going to take the information that we gained and the insight that we gained through this empathy stage, and we're going to map it out. And you'll learn all about that next week. He's actually a fan favorite of from our last design school, and so I don't think that you guys will want to miss what Andrew talks about next week.
So that's it for us. I appreciate everybody signing in today. What another fantastic day in conversations. All the slide deck and the video recording will be available online, and it will be sent out to everybody before tomorrow.
That's right.
So
and
you will have access to that.
We also want to encourage you to tweet your homework to us, or as a last resort, you can send it to us at design.lab.ca. And finally, if you guys have any questions, if you need some help, if you're struggling with parts of it, reach out to us. We are here for you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Enjoy
everyone.
your day.
Have a great day.
Thank you.